Perfect. So we'll go ahead and get started. Lupe, glad you're here. Glad all of us could be here this evening, especially when our days are still going. It makes for a long day. This is another topic in a series of workshops that we've been doing over COVID during the pandemic, continuing to address financial issues that we're all facing, pandemic or not. So in normal times and even under these unique, unusual circumstances, we're always wrestling with how to do better financially, how to make smarter money decisions. And today's topic, dealing with debt, finding credit card debt relief, is going to be more information that we've been talking on for some time when it comes to managing our debt, managing credit cards. Today specifically, I want to focus on four sort of avenues of relief that we can tap into and use when debt gets out of control for us. Oftentimes when this happens, when we're unable to make payments, we begin to panic. When we start playing the nutshell game with our monthly payments, moving around payments to pay for other debts, not paying on certain debts that we have because we have to pay over here, it becomes sort of out of control and out of hand. So when it gets unmanageable, we need to look for several different ways that we can manage this. If we're not going to be able to do it ourselves, what is the next sort of step that we can take? Right? Obviously, we know that credit cards are aplenty. They're easy to get. They're easily given to us because lenders want us to borrow. They want us to use their money so that they can collect interest and make money off of us. And they know our psychology. They know our personal finance behaviors. They know that we're not good at managing this. And they know it's going to take us a long time in general to pay things off, which means that they're going to be able to collect interest on their money for a much longer period of time. So they sort of want us to not be successful with borrowing money because in the long run, while it does create headaches for us and for them, they make more money out of this scenario. Meanwhile, it hurts our credit history, it hurts our credit scores, and it keeps us from having financial freedom and having the peace of mind that we're taking care of our financial house. And it causes stress, it causes anxiety. And then longer term, it could even potentially keep us from improving and getting actually the things that we need, getting that new car that we need. Because we can't get the financing. Maybe perhaps buying our first home. Our credit history becomes sort of dotted with our mistakes with credit cards, with student loan debt, and so on. And so we're always fighting this uphill battle. So today I want to talk about 4 ways to deal with debt and finding some relief when it becomes sort of out of hand and like out of our control. In this first slide here, I mean, we know that the debt in the US for US consumers is astronomical, right? But this is the source for this it's coming from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. That this graph shows the increase in total debt from 2004 to 2020. It's just astronomical. We're talking trillions of dollars here on the left-hand side of the graph, right? And there's actually 2 different kinds of debt that they're showing, and hopefully you can make out the color difference. But that orangish sort of tan brown color there shows housing debt. Obviously, a majority of Americans' debt is within our primary residences, within the real estate that we own, the homes that we own, if you own a home. So we're borrowing well beyond our means in order to afford homes. And we know this all too well in LA County, where the cost of living, the cost of real estate is extremely high, where homes that were built back in the 20s and the 30s, that may be, 3-bedroom with just 1 bathroom are still over $1 million and really actually need to be torn down and rebuilt. But the values on them are so high. So to even get and borrow a mortgage and loan to buy one, we just put ourselves in so much debt right away. And that's why in this graph here, looking at 2020, just housing debt alone is $10 trillion. And then just above that brown section, you'll see sort of the increase above and beyond that in non-housing debt. So this is credit card debt. This is consumer debt. This is automobile lease financing. This is student loan financing. That puts us at a total debt balance of over $14 trillion. I mean, we are just a society that owes. And it's unfortunate that cost of living just in general in America is so high, and that our wages don't compensate for the costs of goods, but it's just sort of a necessity. We have to borrow for a lot of our big purchases in order to make it happen, right? This is very true of the average credit card, right? So in the US, the average American citizen has a minimum of 4 credit cards, which I think is actually low. I've seen averages even higher as to 8 and 12. I would probably put it around the 8. Most of us, between a Visa, a MasterCard, American Express, a Discover, and then our department store cards, our gas cards, we easily have probably closer to 8 credit cards. Now, we may not be using them all at one time. You have one, Christina?
I have one.
Oh, man. You're pulling down the average. Good for you. No. And that's probably how it should be, right? And that's maybe something to shoot for. A goal of ours to have is maybe get our credit cards down to 1 or 2. Maybe have 2 of the major ones. Have a Visa. You probably have a Visa card that doubles as a debit card. And that's plenty, right? Have a MasterCard, or maybe have an alternative Discover or American Express. And that's really all you need. But here we are with an average of 4, right? And the average household with 4 credit cards has a debt of over $8,000 in credit card debt. So we're definitely maxing out, those 4 cards. So we know how bad the situation is, right? We know how we've sort of let this get away from ourselves. So in terms of debt relief, what are the strategies that we can use, right, to help us cope with this debt? Okay. So the goal of debt relief is to give you some breathing room, right? To give us some breathing room so that we can be responsible, so that we can pay our debts. But yet make it manageable, right? Because if we don't do something about it, it will continue to impact our financial future. So what are our options, right? So if we're going to move past do it yourself, how can we start tackling things? The first way we can do this is by creating a debt management plan. Okay? Now, I've in the past given resources out for free debt counseling, right? So there are agencies, nonprofit organizations that will help you with a debt management plan that has the goal of negotiating with your creditors to formulate a repayment plan. Because if what you have right now is not working, if the system you have right now is not working and you're falling behind, you may need to reorganize, right? And that's what these nonprofits will do, okay? So the National Association on Credit Counseling, they'll help you for free. If you need more resources, you can get in contact with Christina or myself, and we'll get you those resources, right? This is something that I believe is not necessary to pay for, okay? You can talk with a financial planner like myself. You can talk with a nonprofit like Family Promise. You can talk with nonprofits like Credit Counseling, and we can help you with this, right? So the goal of a debt management plan is to not erase, not lower, but just reorganize with your creditors to formulate a repayment plan, right? So the benefit of doing this is that it simplifies what you're currently doing, because obviously right now you may be sort of out of control. You don't have a plan. You're not actually managing this, right? So you and this debt management plan would work together to negotiate with your creditors. Maybe you need a pause on your payments for a couple of months. Maybe you need to change your payment amount to make it more affordable. Maybe you need to ask to lower your interest rate on one of your credit cards. This is what I mean by tackling these things with a plan, right? So you'll come to an agreement with your lender to reduce those monthly payments, to lower the interest rates, and maybe even minimize or waive some of the penalties that have been building up on your account. Hey, MasterCard, if I get back on my payment schedule and I make 3 payments in a row, can you waive those last 3 months of penalties that I faced? Okay, because that is just adding to your debt burden. So if we can get back on track and waive some of those penalties, well, that's going to save you money. Okay. Now, this is not going to erase debt immediately. You're not going to feel like financial release of pressure. You're going to have personal mental peace of mind, right? So just know that this plan is going to help keep you organized on top of your bills and your deadlines. And while you're doing that, it will simultaneously improve your credit score, because now you're getting back to making on-time payments. You're not late. You're not missing payments. You're not 60 days delinquent. Okay. And all the while, that's going to help reduce and eliminate contact with those debt collectors. For some of us, just getting on a plan and having those people stop calling us is relief enough, right? You know those numbers. You never pick up. You know they're a strange area code.
You block them and they still keep calling.
Yeah, exactly. So just to not have those people, blowing up your phone all the time would be a relief. Now, the downside to this is if you're in a debt management plan, right, you may not be able to apply for additional lines of credit. So your current lenders may say, okay, that's fine, we'll work with you, but we can't have you taking on additional debt. We're not going to raise your credit card balance limit. We're not going to give you additional funds because you can't manage what you currently owe. Why would we give you more?
Makes sense.
So you have to realize that the downside could be that you may not have additional credit. Okay. If you make late payments, that could exacerbate your situation. It could make for a worse situation with your lenders who you've negotiated with. So here they are, they lowered the interest rate for you, they gave you an extended time, they waived your fees, and then you get right back into the cycle of not making payments. That's going to create a worse situation. You're not going to be able to go back to them and sort of renegotiate a plan. So I would only sort of advocate for this plan if you were very sort of gung-ho about getting back on the wagon and sort of restructuring things and following through. That's when a debt management plan is going to work, when you're motivated. Because even though you may be getting outside help with it, it's still a DIY program. You have to do this yourself. You have to stick to these payments. You have to make those payments. You have to prioritize the debt. The second way to find some debt relief is through debt consolidation. Okay, so this allows those people who are in debt to combine several outstanding debts, right, into a single new loan to be paid off. You have to understand that we're taking multiple debts and we're streamlining them, so reducing the number of payments, but creating a new loan that's going to consume or take up 3 or 4 of those other debts, okay? Ideally, this is going to be with a lower interest rate than you were paying on all of them as multiple loans, right? So if you had 4 credit cards and you owed a balance on all of them, right? Each with different interest rates, right? But maybe they were all somewhere around 20%, right? Being able to consolidate that debt, we would apply for a new loan and pay off all of those 4 cards with that new loan, and you would only owe to that new loan. Okay, so there's benefits to this. Obviously, you could get a lower interest rate. Instead of making multiple payments all over the place and having to organize and manage that, like in a debt management plan, we're consolidating those 4 payments into one. So we streamline our payments. That creates a more manageable monthly payment, right? But again, if you miss that payment, you're still repeating the same sort of mistakes that you were even with 4 credit cards. Right? It's just on a new loan that you're still making that mistake. Okay. Now, the downside to this is that when you combine those debts, right, and you lower the interest rate, and maybe you get a lower monthly payment, those are all benefits, but we know that that could potentially extend the life of what you're paying off because it's taking you longer at lower amounts to pay it off. So you may be in a situation when you consolidate your debts that it actually takes longer to pay them off. And because it takes longer, even at a lower interest rate, that could actually increase the total amount that you owe. So a lot of times people will spring for debt consolidation because it gives them that upfront benefit of, that relief, lower payments, lower interest rate. I'm going to take it. But they don't realize they're actually getting into this longer extended loan, which means they're going to owe more in the long run, right? And they're not thinking about it in the long-term sense. You have to be careful too, because another risk is that that new loan could have a variable interest rate, which means it could change at the whim of that loan's lender. So they may offer you this initial lower interest rate loan that's lower than those credit cards, but then they could change it at any time. So if you do debt consolidation, you want to make sure that this new loan that you're entering into has a fixed interest rate. Now, some of the debt consolidation can differ between the types of debts that you're trying to consolidate. Okay, so whether you're consolidating student loan debt, whether you're consolidating credit card debt, whether you're consolidating a personal loans. the terms can be completely different depending on the type of consolidation that you're doing. And normally we don't mix consolidating a student loan debt with credit card debt with a personal loan. They're just three different kinds of borrowed money, so they'll never put it all together, right? So you can't say, oh man, I have this troublesome student loan and I really want to take out this loan to like remodel my kitchen. You can't consolidate the two. They're different kinds of monies owed to different kinds of lenders. It's just not going to happen. If you're struggling to make monthly payments on your current credit card bills, you would probably be a good candidate for consolidating your debts versus skipping your payments. Because skipping, as we know, is going to create penalties, it's going to create fees, it's going to negatively impact our credit score. So that's one sort of telltale sign that maybe consolidation might be a good idea. Now, if you use a firm to do debt consolidation, right, they may charge you an upfront fee to do this. And there's no guarantee what interest rate they could get you, who the lender's going to be, what your monthly consolidated payment is going to be. So there's another risk, is that you're paying more money to have somebody do this for you, and there's really no guarantee that it's going to put you ahead of the game in the long run. So just look for those red flags. So the third type of debt relief that we could seek would be debt settlement, right? And people initially like this idea because there's the possibility of erasing debt, sort of lowering the actual total amount, right? Resolving that debt for less than the total that you owe. Wow, so if I borrowed $50,000, but they'll settle for me just paying off $20,000 and I can wipe away and erase $30,000 of my debt? Well, of course I'll take that deal. It's not always as good as it looks. Okay? So yes, the benefit of debt settlement, right, is to negotiate with the lender a reduced amount, right? So you're minimizing the amount of debt that you owe. And you could potentially eliminate your debt with a lump sum payment, right? So you don't have to keep going on this payment plan. So let's say you have a credit card that's, I don't know, $3,000, okay? And gosh, $3,000 is going to take you months, if not years, to pay off at your current minimum of $15 a month. But wow, if they cut that debt in half and all I owed was $1,500, well, maybe I can scrounge that up and I'll just pay the $1,500 and wipe my hands of it and be done with it, right? So that sounds like a good deal because then I only pay half of what I owe and I'm done paying it off and I don't have to continue these monthly payments. Normally, to do debt settlement, you have to hire a debt settlement firm. So this will be a company. There are even attorneys who specialize in debt settlement because they negotiate legally with your lenders, with the creditors, to change this amount.
How expensive is that?
What's that?
I said, how expensive is that to hire a debt settlement firm?
It depends.
Yeah.
The fees range from $500 to thousands of dollars. And oftentimes they require that up front before they've done any work on settling. So you don't even know what the outcome of the settlement is going to actually be. how much are they going to actually reduce your debts by? There's no guarantee. Unfortunately, in this area, there's been a lot of scams where people will take your money up front and never really negotiate and settle with your creditors. Or they'll make false and empty promises that they can, and they can get nowhere. Like, you could have done a better job. So just know that. So a lot of times these shady places will charge fees before they settle your debts. Oftentimes you'll see them saying, oh, there's this new government program to bail you out of your credit card debt. No, there's not a new government program for that. They make guarantees, right, that they're going to stop all debt collection calls, any possible tax liens or lawsuits against you. They're gonna reduce your owed debt to just like pennies on the dollar. I mean, these are all sort of outlandish guarantees, right? That should be warnings to us that this is not reputable, this is not credible. Okay. So the big red flag with debt settlement is you run the risk that if you settle, you may create a taxable event. This is the big thing that most people overlook, right? So that, let's say we had that $50,000 debt and we wipe away 30,000 of it, and now we only owe 20. That 30,000 will impact your income taxes. The government, the IRS, will consider that 30,000 that was wiped away as a gift to you. You borrowed it. Now you don't have to pay it back. It is taxable income. So in like our excitement to get rid of that debt, we actually create another financial burden for ourselves because we just raised our taxable income, right? So let's say we're making $45,000 a year and we erase 30,000 of our debt, right? We're now in a tax bracket, a higher tax bracket, because now it looks like we've earned $75,000 in that year. So we may then ultimately, we erase some debt that we couldn't pay anyways, and now we owe another debt to the IRS.
Right.
Yeah. So that forgiven debt is now looked at as income. So be careful on that. Now, in our credit card example, let's say you're forgiven $1,500. $1,500 added to your annual income is not going to make a huge tax impact. But for those larger debt forgiveness amounts, you definitely have to be thinking about taxes. So if you have somebody who does your taxes, if you have a tax advisor, if you have a CPA, accountant, I don't care, H&R Block, whoever it is, you should probably consult with them before you jump into a debt settlement. Last strategy for relief that I wanted to talk about today, and sort of last resort, is bankruptcy.
Dun, dun, dun.
So we see this happen all the time. Individuals use bankruptcy, businesses use bankruptcy, large massive corporations use bankruptcy. But you have to understand that there's varying types of bankruptcy and how they're used and why they're used. So bankruptcy is actual federal court proceeding that is seeking to sort of hit a reset button and create a fresh start by forgiving your debts. Okay. So there's three types. There's Chapter 7, Chapter 11, and Chapter 13. Okay. Typically for the individual, for consumers like you and I, right, Chapter 7 is generally sort of the go-to. This offers debt forgiveness in exchange for us handing over our assets, right? So we give up our vehicles, we give up, our personal assets in exchange for it being all wiped away. So high value possessions like property and cash and stocks and bonds, it all has to be liquidated. We have to sell it off in order to repay a portion of what we owed as part of this proceeding. That's Chapter 7. Chapter 7 stays on your credit history for 10 years if you file a Chapter 7. So this is not without consequence. If you try to get a loan in the future, it may be difficult. If you try to buy a car, it may be difficult because it's going to be there for any lender to see and check out for the next 10 years. And you may be a risk, and maybe somebody doesn't want to lend to you because they see that you declared bankruptcy. Or they may lend to you, but at a much, much higher interest rate because you are a risk. Chapter 11 is typically used by businesses. They file a Chapter 11 that allows them to not go out of business, but just reorganize their business, redo their finances, right? So it's not that they're bankrupt, it's just that they're reorganizing their finances. They're still able to come up with a debt repayment plan. They're still able to handle debts, right? But just sort of, again, hit the reset button and reorganize things. It allows them to renegotiate with their lenders. So you'll see businesses doing this a lot of times where you're like, I thought that place went bankrupt and they're still open. It's just a financial reorganization. Rarely will an individual use Chapter 11. Okay. An individual could use Chapter 13. This is when you earn too much money to qualify for Chapter 7. You'll opt for 13. So what this means is that because you make enough, they're going to create a debt repayment plan for you, and you would not lose your assets. You would not have to sell things off. Because you make enough, they're just going to make sure that you enter into a repayment plan. So typically, individuals use Chapter 7 because they're so far in debt and they can't repay things because they don't have enough income. That's Chapter 7. So either way, whether it's Chapter 7 or Chapter 13, they're going to be on your credit history for either 10 or 7 years. It's going to impact your credit score. Your credit score is going to take a huge hit. It's going to take a long time to rebuild that back. And like I was saying, you may not have future borrowing power because you're viewed as a risk. That is worst case scenario, last resort. This is not something that we go, oh gosh, I'm so tired of just paying these bills. Let's just declare bankruptcy.
A Donald Trump thing, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. So like his casinos, Chapter 11. His other businesses, Chapter 11. It just allows him to conveniently reorganize and not have to make all this debt repayment that his businesses owe or that any business would owe. So, those are the four sort of levels, I guess, if you want to even look at them as in terms of how extreme they are. From a very sort of do-it-yourself debt repayment plan where you can get free help doing that, to consolidation. Let's combine those debts and have one payment, maybe try to get lower interest rates. To settlement, maybe you're erasing some of it, but knowing there are some consequences like, a taxable event. To, worst case scenario, you may have to seek bankruptcy. But in all situations, I think it pays to get advice. It pays to ask and look for help in terms of determining what is the best sort of plan for you based on sort of what stage you're at with your debt. So if you have questions about that, if you're interested in learning more, if you've tried other things before and they haven't been working out, maybe you're trying to look for what can I do next? Talk with Christina or I, talk with Family Promise. We can get you the resources that you need, the help that you need. And you don't have to try to figure it out yourself. You don't have to do it alone.
You are not alone, exactly.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you guys being here this evening, taking your time after a long day after work. And our next workshop is September 24th. So not next week, but the following week. So we just sort of go in this routine schedule of every other week. And we continue to, change the topics, sort of hitting on important personal finance topics and sort of as we see the need.
If you have topic ideas or would like to learn more about something else, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys have a great night and we'll see you on the 24th.
Bye. Thanks, Bryan.
Bye.